Welcome back. This is lesson 19.2. In this lesson, we'll look at a feature of object-oriented programming called encapsulation. In this lesson, you'll learn what encapsulation means, why it's often used by programmers. We'll look at an example of an exam question and an example of a program that uses encapsulation. So what does encapsulation mean? Encapsulation means that the attributes of an object can be made private. So encapsulation means that the attributes are encapsulated, they can't be altered, they can't be looked at in the main program, they're set as private. We don't use encapsulation in our standard Python programming. So all the examples that I will look at in this lesson are written in pseudocode, where you can set attributes as private. It's worth noticing that methods can be private too, but I'm not going to talk so much about that feature. Here's an example of a constructor in pseudocode. You'll notice that the procedure new is set as public. In the exam, if you're doing an A-level exam, you will notice that all the methods used in their OOP definitions are specified as public or very occasionally as private. This is an example of encapsulation. This is the constructor, and the class is called user, and every user has three attributes: a name, an address, and a true/false value called verified. Name and address are sent from the main program as parameters. The method is public and there are three attributes. Because all the attributes are default to public, they can be copied or output in the main program. For example, you could print the verified status of a user, and they can be changed in the main program. So here's a little bit of code. If a passcode is entered as 1234, set verified to true. So these are examples of attributes that are being used freely in the main program. Now here's another example of a class definition in pseudocode. Can you see the difference? At the very top of the class definition, before the constructor, the program has specified that the verified attribute is private. That means it cannot be shown in the main program, and it cannot be altered in the main program. However, sometimes we may need to use this attribute or change it, and for this reason we'll have to write new methods which allow us to show or to access, to get the value of the attribute, and a set method that lets us change the value of the attribute. And we'll use get and set methods in place of the attribute name itself in the main program. So let's have a look at some examples of this. So here's an example of the get method. In this example, it gets the value of the verified attribute. There's only one line in this method. When this method is called, it returns the value of the verified attribute to the main program. So let's see that in use. Often in the main program, we want to show or use the value of an attribute. In an ordinary program, we do it like this. For example, print user01.verified. That would print the verified attribute of user01. But if the attribute is private, this command would not work because we're referring to the attribute directly in the main program. So if the attribute is private, we need to show it like this. Instead of the verified attribute, we've written the get verified method name, and that will return the value of the attribute to the main program. So it will have exactly the same result, but it's done in a slightly different way. Similarly, if we want to alter the value of an attribute, in this case verified, we need to use a set procedure, and this procedure is called set verified. It takes a passcode, and if the passcode is correct, then verified is set to true. So this is a way of setting the verified value to true using a set procedure, and let's see that in use in the main program. In the main program, we could normally just alter the value of an attribute. For example, user01.verified is true, but if the attribute was set to be private, we'd have to use the set procedure, and this would have exactly the same effect. It would set verified to true, but we're doing it through a method instead of doing it directly with a command in the main program. So you must use this procedure whenever you want to change the value. Now, why do we do this? It seems like an unnecessary level of complication, and I expect by now you're getting used to how many of the more difficult features of modern programming are in place to prevent unwanted side effects, which can be very damaging or costly. For any programmer in the programming team, if they want to use or alter the value of an attribute, they have to use the pre-written procedure. That means it's much more difficult for them to make unwanted changes, and we can build in safeguards into the get and set procedures to prevent unwanted changes from occurring. It also gives the person who wrote the original object definition more control over the way the attributes are used in the main program. And all this is good for helping programmers to work together in teams with less risk and less overwriting of each other's work. So that extra little bit of bother in the long run is typically worth it, and encapsulation is used quite a lot in programming. So we've looked at some programming. You may also be asked to write about encapsulation in the exam. So in programming, you'll see private and public used as words in the pseudocode examples. But in the exam, they'll actually use in written questions, they'll typically use the word encapsulation. So here's a typical exam question. It's 12 marks. And we're just going to write part of that answer right now. So the exam question: a mobile phone operating system is developed using OOP. Describe the benefits of the OOP paradigm with reference to encapsulation, polymorphism and inheritance. We haven't done polymorphism and inheritance yet, but we have obviously just learnt what encapsulation is. So let's write a third of that exam question, the third that is all about encapsulation. Because there are 12 marks overall, if you could get 3 or 4 marks from a discussion of encapsulation, you'd be heading for very high marks overall in this question. So remember the checklist. When we're writing these longer questions, we have to show understanding, which would be our understanding of technical terms. we need to apply our understanding to an example, and then we have to evaluate. And I've just said here just a few words on the benefits of encapsulation would do. You can see that the exam question actually asks you to describe benefits. It doesn't ask you to give any drawbacks or anything. So in this example, remember, it's important to read the question, but in this example, a discussion of benefits would be sufficient. You don't have to give disadvantages as well in order to answer this question. Okay, so 3 or 4 marks, making up about a third of the final exam answer. I strongly recommend that you pause this video, get out your pen, and just write a 3 or 4 mark answer that covers those 3 points. What encapsulation means, how we might use it if we're making a mobile phone operating system, and why we might do that. So I'll just pause the video. I'm going to continue in a couple of minutes showing you a draft answer that I put together. This answer is partly based on the mark scheme from the exam board, so it is very much the kind of thing that they're looking for. Under the heading of understanding, we wouldn't write those headings in the exam answer. I'm just showing you how the answer addresses these 3 points. To show understanding, we'd have to explain what encapsulation means. So encapsulation means that attributes of classes can't be altered directly, but only through get and set methods. So that's exactly what we've learned this lesson, and it's one sentence that just shows that you have a clue about what encapsulation means. And then the larger section in the middle, applying this to writing an operating system for a mobile phone, which I think is actually quite a difficult example. But for example, the choices input by the user in a menu or a text box wouldn't have an effect until you trigger a get command by pressing a second button. And this is often the case. You'll notice this in operating systems. You make choices, but then it doesn't actually, they don't alter, they don't have a permanent effect until you trigger them by pressing a second button. And evaluation, that means there's a pause. You can review what you've chosen before inputting the final values into the operating system. You could also say, as an advantage, that different procedures within the operating system could be set so that they couldn't overwrite the default values of the operating system, and this would protect the mobile phone from unwanted damage to the system, for example. So let's just review what we've talked about. You should now know what encapsulation is, and you should know what private methods and attributes are. We've mainly been looking at private attributes. Those are attributes that cannot be altered in the main program, but only through get and set procedures. Private methods are similar. They can't be used in the main program. They can only be used inside other methods. You'll come across that less often, I think. We looked at an exam question example, and we did a little bit of programming using get and set methods. So this is programming to do. Obviously, we can't actually set attributes to private in Python, but let's just say that we're going to treat some of the attributes of our program as private, and we're going to write get and set methods. So create an object which is a bank account. You can decide what attributes it will have, but one thing it will have is a passcode, and the passcode will be set to a random 4-digit number which is displayed on the screen every time you create an instance of the class. And then write further methods that will allow you to alter the passcode, but first you've got to enter the old passcode, and you should use set and get methods for this programming task. Okay, so encapsulation is quite a challenging topic, but you will see private and public used as terms in the OOP examples in the exam. And the use of this won't be too challenging, but it is important that you know what these terms mean and what the overall technical term encapsulation means. We're going to look at 2 more technical terms in the next 2 lessons, and in the final lesson of this week we'll go back again and look at some more get and set methods. Okay, bye for now.